Starting again without starting from zero. Welcome back to another episode of Letters from My Career Buddy. Today, I have a very special guest with me because her story touches us on something I know many of our listeners are experiencing. Starting again in a new country while trying to rebuild your professional identity. My guest today is Mehnaz Ashraf. Mehnaz is a technology product manager with more than 13 years of experience across software engineering, business analysis, and product management. Her expertise sits at a fascinating intersection of technology, business, and product, particularly in a cloud native platform, telecom, 5G, and AI. But what really caught my attention about Mehnaz's story isn't just her technical background, it's the journey behind it. She moved from Bangalore to Australia and began navigating a completely new professional environment here in Sydney. And rather than seeing herself as starting from zero, she has been bringing her experience, curiosity, and perspective into a new chapter. She is also an entrepreneur, a writer, and an author of Unruffled Mind. And I love that she describes her approach to product management through three words: kindness, curiosity, and clarity. So today we are going to talk about what it really means to start again. What happens when your experience is strong but the market is new? How do you rebuild your network? And how do you deal with uncertainties? And perhaps most importantly, how do you remind yourself that starting again doesn't really mean starting from zero? Manas, welcome to Letters from My Career Buddy. I am so happy to have you here.
Hey, Niga, thanks for having me. I'm equally excited to be part of this podcast and share my journey so far in Sydney. Thanks for having me once again.
Thank you. Before we talk about Australia and careers, tell us a bit about Menas. Who were you before you became a product manager?
Well, I started my career as a software engineer, and I still love coding, and I still do code. Before I became a product manager, I was a product manager in the making. So I have taught myself the data analytics. I learned descriptive statistics, digital marketing, SEO, and also bootstrap my business, which enabled me to learn the financial and the non financial aspects of running a business. But because it wasn't $1 million success, so my business partner and we wrapped it up. So yes, I then moved into a product management, which basically collaborates all my previous experience into this role. Yeah.
You moved across software engineering, business analysis, and product management. How interesting. And what made you make those transitions?
Um, so like I said, coding, like I said, I started as a software developer, and coding itself is a mental muscle, which gets better as one practices more. So with time, we start, seeing things from a bigger perspective, and we connect the smaller things like coding to the physical world around us, and also to do that transition. I think it's very important to transition to from one phase to another. I think it comes very naturally. For instance, for my for as a software engineer, I was more focused on writing the code. But then later, I realized how does my code connect to a certain feature of a product, and how does the feature connect to the entire product. Then I also realized, how do I engineer products that scale well? How do I engineer products that give good performance to the users? What kind of physical and software infrastructure do we need to achieve that performance? So I think it's a natural progression, and eventually we start seeing things. How does my product help in organizations or a society in general. I think being in the software industry, this comes quite naturally.
Do you think your technical background actually became more valuable when you moved into the product side?
Um, uh, So in the last, I spent last half a decade or 6 years, like in a quite complex technical environment. It was a telecom and 5G and cloud native environment. So I would say being non-technical would have definitely hurted me. My technical background allowed me to make better product decisions. However, I would say being non-technical as a product manager is certainly doable. It's just that you will take more time to be good product manager to make better decisions at the product, but it's certainly doable.
And in with your technical background and your product transition, what skills do you think that followed through every one of those career transitions? Was it your communication, problem solving, or stakeholder management, or more around your curiosity?
Um, I would say I will not say it's one skill. I think it's a lot of skills that I learned over a period of time. So looking at the problem, understanding the problem, dividing and the problem into smaller chunks, um, and then which are smaller chunks which are solvable, and then things like communicating your vision of the product to the multiple stakeholders, especially in telecom. A product in a telecom, a cloud native telecom, we don't really have a standalone product. A product is always integrations from multiple products across the cloud. So communicating your vision to the stakeholders, enabling them to see the perspective that you are looking at, that itself is a skill. So I think it's a combination of multiple skills uh, that I have taken from being just a software developer to being a product manager. And also the curiosity, the adaptability to the new roles, new products. I think it's all of these skills. Yeah.
Hmm, that's so true. And you wrote something that really resonated with me. Moving overseas and starting all over again is hard. What was the hardest part for you?
Um. Uh. See. Like I said, moving to Sydney, definitely, moving to Sydney was hard. And because moving to Sydney, felt like a context shifted overnight, From my experience, I realized that the job market in Sydney is hard, I believe, and it feels different. Sometimes even the terminology that is used to discuss remunerations or the job responsibilities of a product manager, they feel a bit different. So, despite having over 30 years of experience, I still feel I kind of feel new in this ecosystem where nobody knows me. And it feels like I'm starting all over again, which is okay. I'm okay to start all over again, but it's just taking time. So back home in Bangalore, everything was all set and it had taken years to build. But here in Sydney, I'm trying to get to that state really fast, but it's taking time. So even as simple as driving license, feels like a big task for me. So it's not one thing that was hard. It's a combination of these multiple factors: the job, the network, the culture, in smaller proportions. That is making it look like a big feat to achieve. Having said that, it may not happen to everyone. Everyone may experience it a different way. And I think it's just a matter of time.
I so resonate with that, Manas. It does take time in starting completely fresh into a new ecosystem.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When you arrived in Australia, did you feel like the market saw the professional you had been in India, or did you feel you had to prove yourself again?
Um, uh, See, any work, be it a product manager or the CEO of an organization, a software engineer, or a trading or the retail, It requires not just the skills, but also the knowledge and experience of the context in which one is working. So while one might be great at what a skill that they have, but once the context changes, like it did for me, it's extremely essential to build that context over again. I might be good product manager, but because the way of working in Sydney is different, the compliances, for instance, of a product that need to be met, they are different. The risks to be addressed are different, and security requirements, data requirements, they all are different. So familiarizing myself with these differences is essential to do the work effectively. So I believe, yes, proving myself in the new context is essential, not as a product manager, but as a product manager in the new context of Sydney is essential.
Yeah, and I do believe that proving yourself, even at every stage, right? You move into a new role within Sydney or within
True.
any country. Every time you do need to showcase, and you bring certain skills and showcase what your experience is and your skills again, which is the part of learning and enjoyable part.
Always. I think that's how life is. Yes, true.
What would you say to someone who has 10 to 15 years of experience overseas, but comes to Australia and suddenly feels like a graduate again? And how do you separate? How would you separate? I don't have that local experience or Australian experience from someone who says that I don't have value.
Okay. I suddenly feel like a graduate all over again. So, as I mentioned earlier, because the context has changed, every time anybody makes a move to a different country or a different place altogether, the context has changed. So it's important to know about the changes in the new context. So one of the examples that I want to give from telecom is this. Um, when I work with a German client for telecom with Rakuten Symphony, so they needed to be compliant with GDPR, which is basically how the data privacy is handled, right? But here in Australia, there is no GDPR. What we have is the Privacy Act. So as a product manager, I know for certain that the product data has to be handled a certain way. In Australia, I need to implement the rules of Privacy Act, not the GDPR. And this knowledge is certainly different from, oh, do we even need to handle the data in a certain way? They're two different things. So I'm certainly bringing the value of knowing that data has to be handled in a certain way, but I just need to adjust that part to the in the Australian context of meeting the data privacy with the Privacy Act and not the GDPR. So yeah, everybody brings in the value. We just need to align to the context. In this case, for me, it's Sydney.
Yeah, package your complete value and align it to what you're after. 100%. You
100%.
made networking a very, very intentional part of your move to Sydney. And what did you learn about networking in Australia?
Um, See, I as every person is different, and I think for some people, networking comes totally easy, but for me, that's not the case. It takes an effort for me, especially when you don't want to make a superficial network. You want to make a network that has meaningful connections in it, where you know people, what they're doing, their perspectives. So uh, I think for me, I need to work more on making the meaningful connections rather than just knowing people at a very superficial level.
Right. And did people respond well to the networking?
Um, Initially, I started networking via LinkedIn. Uh, um, there were very few people who responded. I would say only 1% of the people, and I wouldn't say it's something to do with them. I'm sure it's something to do with the all of a sudden somebody from who has absolutely no context of Sydney, pinging them up in LinkedIn saying, "Hey, you know what? We want to have a coffee," but that is hard for anybody to respond. So I would say, yeah, it's a very, very less people, more to do with the general context connections and less to do with them. Yeah,
Absolutely. It's not everyone's who's doing a full-time job, and sometimes it's very hard for them
true,
to pick
true,
up
true.
but and start networking 100%. And one interesting questions for a lot of new migrants. What's that one networking mistake that migrants should avoid?
Oh, okay. So I would say asking for a job in the first conversation. I think this really puts anybody off. You want to make sure that you definitely have established a meaningful connection with the person, know their work, know their personality, know what they're interested in, and only if you are kind of in sync with each other, you have some similarities within your work perspective, you can then ask for a job after you have built a meaningful conversation. So don't just jump on asking for a job in the first conversation. It doesn't make any sense.
That is a great piece of advice indeed. If someone's listening today said, I don't know anyone in Australia, what would you tell them to do tomorrow morning?
I would say hop onto the train and connect with people. So I would say definitely it's about connecting people on the ground. Making connections on LinkedIn is only the first step, but it's certainly it's meeting the people on the ground. Every person has likes, for instance, interest in the sports or hiking or reading or travel. I would say connect with people on LinkedIn or other, websites like Meetup and stuff, or Strava, where you have a similarities between somebody, between you and somebody else, and go meet them personally, ask them, share the experiences with them. So the first thing I would say, go ahead and meet the people. It's not a job, not from a job perspective, but really making connections in the new place that you landed in.
Yeah, meet people, make friends. You started this chapter looking for job opportunities in Sydney. And what surprised you most about the Australian job market?
I am very surprised at how much of emphasis that they give on knowing somebody, having a deeper connection with somebody. Back in India, if you're great technically, and you're able to do the job, I think people just offer you, people interview you, and you're good throughout, and you might get a job. But I think in Australia, I think they lay more emphasis on knowing the person at least in advance, or knowing them more, not just from a job perspective, but also about their other qualities, their interests, and stuff like that. So deeper connections is something was very, very new to me, and I think it's very new for me, somebody who is in the Australian market now.
Right. And with this learning, was there anything you had to change about how you presented yourself?
Uh, Initially, when I met people, my first purpose was to show them that I know technical things, okay? But then over a period of time, I realized that they do not really lay focus on just the technical things. They see you as a personality, as a person. What value do you bring? What your interests are, and stuff like that. So I think I stopped showing only my technical side, and started introducing myself as a person. What value can I bring? What my interests are, and the way I communicate, and how do I get the work done? So it's a person as a whole, not just the tech part of it.
Yeah. Did you have to rethink your LinkedIn, CV, networking, interview approach, the entire stack of process while for the job search?
um I did, definitely, because the way people, like I said, the whole context has changed now. So I definitely took some time, and I asked for advices as well of how people perceive you when they look at your CV or a LinkedIn. So I definitely had to make some changes in not only in the LinkedIn or the CV, but also the way I approach people here, the way I the way I network with the people, or the way I approach to questions asked in the interview. So yes, once you are here, the context is different. So you have to change things in a certain way. And I think it's good because you'll be able to make better connections this way.
Yeah, and we just tailor the approach to the audience, and that's one of the very big part of what we coach a lot of our clients on. Moving on to your the way you described your approach through three words, which was kindness, curiosity, and clarity. Why those three words?
Um, so Um, so normally when people work in a high pressure environments, I've seen people lose their calm. They're not able to control their language, or they kind of start shooting emails and use very harsh words and stuff like that. I do understand that, not meeting goals or not getting the work done on time kind of feels like feels personal, but it does not give liberty to anybody to be mean or use harsh words to others. So I think the kindness is what gets the work done, even in the high pressure environments, high pressure situations. And I've actually done that. And I'm very happy that I choose kindness over anything else. It's kind of it feels like, being mean or rude it can make you, get the work done faster, but it's certainly not the case. So I think I would always choose kindness over anything else.
And Menas, the very interesting part, and I do always get fascinated by people who are authors or end up writing a book, and you have done one. So tell us a little bit more about the book you've written, why the title, and what's the philosophy behind it.
uh okay. So if you haven't grabbed the book Unruffled Mind, I would suggest you to grab one. So it's basically it's my memoir. And the word unruffled mind just means that despite the tribulations a person can have in their life, one can still develop a very calm attitude. It means a mind which is not disturbed or ruffled by any situations, any hard situations that you are in. So yeah, I would always keep an unruffled mind no matter what situation I'm in.
And what's that one lesson that from your book that you find yourself using in your career today?
Being unruffled, like keeping it calm, come what may. Like for instance, I'm in Sydney now, and I do feel challenged and annoyed by not grabbing my role in faster in Sydney. But these are not going to do any good to me. So I would rather focus on what matters by staying calm and focusing on getting to what I'm after.
That is indeed a book that's worth reading. I would go and grab that for sure.
Yes, thank you.
And we are at the last section, which is an exciting part, which is a rapid fire section.
All
And
right.
Mehnaz's
Let's do it.
career letters, yes. So I'll ask you a bunch of questions, and if you can answer them quickly, and we can move like at a pace with these. The first question is one thing you wish you knew before moving to Australia.
Uh, Job market is tough and different both at the same time.
One networking lesson.
Meet people personally in Sydney.
One career mistake you have learned from.
Uh, eh, uh, Go slow but don't stop.
Okay. One skill every migrant professional should develop.
Networking in person. I cannot emphasize this enough, honestly.
One thing people should stop putting their CV.
Irrelevant details. If it's not relevant, don't put in there. Simple as that.
One thing they should start talking about more.
Um, Explaining their work and its impact.
One piece of advice for someone feeling rejected.
Well, it's a stepping stone. Just use it.
One thing you would tell your younger self.
Again, slow down but don't stop.
That's exciting. And the final question, if you could write one letter to the person who has just arrived in Australia, With a suitcase full of experience but doesn't know what comes next, what would that letter say?
Be a kid. That's because being a kid means you are more receptive, which means this will actually open up your mind and the possibilities in any new place. So be a kid.
Thank you so much, Mehnaz. That was a great piece of advice. And with that, this is Nikhat. We are signing off from Letters from My Career Buddy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigat, and the entire My Career Buddy team.